Part 77. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 762. Had a big battle? Gretel looked at senior brother Baebo in surprise. There were 3 obvious red marks remaining on the side of senior brother's cheek, and the edges were scorched black, as if they had been scratched by something. The longest red mark extended all the way up to the temple. It was obvious that he almost caught his eye. Looking at the senior sister, the 16th level Archmage Philby, the edge of the dark blue dress is stranded. It is unclear whether it has been burned by fire or corroded by acid. There was a bulge on his left shoulder, and the aura of life underneath was so obvious that he couldn't ignore it. According to Gretel, this was probably a particularly difficult wound, so he used a bandage soaked in holy water to suppress it. Both senior brothers and sisters were injured. How can an 18th or 16th level Archmage be injured like this when he goes out with a legendary mage? What kind of enemy will they face? What earth-shattering scenes can be created? The only high-level battle that Gretel had ever seen was on the battlefield invaded by the glorious Holy See. Archmage Carlyle and others took action against the Archbishop and Paladins of the glorious Holy See. At that time, it looked like the earth was shaking and the entire battlefield was about to collapse. Looking back now, no matter what, the most powerful Archmage Carlyle on that battlefield was only level 14. Hey, I really want to take a look. Of course Greet also knew that if he stood near the battlefield, he would probably be torn into pieces by the elemental storm. Sure enough, even watching the excitement requires sufficient strength. Gretel has no doubt that if he is strong enough to watch this excitement, the Lord of Thunder will definitely grab him and put him on the edge of the battlefield. So who are you fighting? Is it cool to win? Greet asked with her eyes. Senior brother Burbo's face was still bright, and he looked proud and heroic at the same time. He took a step towards Gretel and lowered his voice. Little Greet, you can't believe what we did this time. We dash. With a creak, the office door opened. Archmage Baebo immediately shut up, adjusted his robe, coughed, and walked in solemnly. Their facial expressions and movements are completely different. Gretel had a hard time holding back laughter. Turn to the side, put your back against the wall, and let the senior brothers and sisters go first. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, seeing the 5 figures filing in, leaving only himself, the smile on Gretel's lips gradually faded away. Alexander. The teacher has been away for 2 months, and I don't know if the homework I handed in can satisfy him. If it's just a little bit dissatisfied, that's okay, but what if it's very dissatisfied? It is conceivable that his end will not be too good. Gretel tugged on the hem of his coat, touched the space bag with his hand, and thought about several papers in the space bag. Well, no problem, there are several papers this time. He puffed up his chest vigorously, assumed an unashamed posture, and strode in. As soon as I entered the door, I was stunned for a moment. The teacher has changed clothes. How strange that the Lord of Thunder, who has never changed his white shirt, black tie and black 3-piece suit since the first meeting, actually changed his clothes. Well, although this one is also quite handsome. A black hunting jacket with broad shoulders and a narrow waist, 4 large envelope-style pockets, and the buttons on it all shine. The neatly tightened cuffs and the epaulets on both sides are also sewn with a row of magic props in the shape of buttons. The condensed elemental light shimmered particularly strongly in Gretel's eyes. The important thing is that the shape of the monocle has also changed. It was changed to look like a pilot's goggles, with the sides extending out and buckled on the Lord of Thunder's forehead. Of course, there is still only one spectacle lens, which is blue and has writing scrolling on it. Greet vaguely saw a thin beam of light coming from the lenses of his glasses, shrouding the front of the teacher. Probably, maybe, they are intertwined into a screen of light. Teacher. He was too obviously stunned. With a bang, the door closed behind him, shutting out all the disciples of the Archmage. The voice of the Lord of Thunder immediately sounded. "What are you doing standing there in a daze? Come sit here. I'm still in the mood to think about things. It seems that your progress has been quite good during this period. Let's start with you." "Well." Greet shook his head quickly. "Are you kidding me? Being the first to speak has always been the privilege of senior brothers and sisters. Even if they all follow them out, there are still 4 more behind them." He quickened his pace and took his seat. The Lord of Thunder stopped asking questions and coughed lightly. He raised his palm, and in the center of the palm, which was rarely seen wearing long gloves, a prismatic alexandrite, half a palm long and 1 inch in diameter, suddenly appeared. Radiant and shining. Greet exclaimed and covered his eyes with his hands on the spot. Even if he didn't use detection magic to look at it, the brightness of this gem made him unable to open his eyes. He covered his eyes with both hands and threw 7 or 8 healing spells on his eyes in one breath before he stopped the tears that were pouring out. "Blind, blind. What the hell is this? Why does it light up like this? Teacher, what you are holding in your hand is not a radioactive crystal, is it? Or a reactor core? This color and brightness are obviously abnormal. Holding it directly in your hand, wearing only a long glove encrusted with gems, won't it burn you? In other words, this glove is actually used for protection and isolation?" Then, in the darkness, he heard the voice of the Lord of Thunder. "This time, Spellweaver Lord Ramzan and Sage's Crown Lord Tavaran and I traveled across the ocean and killed a demigod in the dense forest in the southern part of the New World." Thin gasps came one after another. Gretel also took a breath of air. "Teacher, you are a legend." "What a legend? Are 3 legends enough to surround and kill demigods? Besides you, are the other 2 legends coming back? Is it safe?" He really wanted to open his eyes and take a look, but his eyes hadn't recovered yet and couldn't open them at all. The Lord of Thunder's voice suddenly contained a slight smile. "It's said to be a demigod, but it's actually a totem beast that has lived a few extra years and been worshipped by the natives for hundreds of years. This demigod's power is about plants and the direction of life. It suits our needs, so we brought it over." Gretel bared his teeth under his palm. "Well, I heard before that in response to the plan to launch the Year of No Summer, the holy power of the God of Nature order is very short, but someone has already taken care of it. So, your solution is to kill a demigod or a totem beast. This is a rare opportunity. While the divine crystal is here, you all should observe it carefully. Gretel, stop covering your eyes and put your hands down. If your eyes still feel uncomfortable, release your mental power and use telekinesis. Okay, is this the perk of being a legendary disciple? Things like divine crystals should probably be made whole or divided, and then sent to all parts of the country to be used as spell power for the priests of the Order of the God of Nature. But before that, you can let them observe and expand their knowledge. Greet can imagine that when this divine crystal is used up, many magicians, no, maybe most magicians, will not know its existence at all. Of course Greet would not waste the teacher's kindness. He increased his speed, threw 2 more healing spells on his eyes, soothed his retinas and pupils, and opened his eyes. The mental power was released, and the surging power in the green prism immediately rushed towards his face. Gretel groaned in pain. This guy deserves to die. He half closed his eyes and allowed a lot of information to flow through his heart. Do you know how he taught people to plant, set a fire, burn the fields, and just scatter the seeds? If the ground is thin and cannot be planted, everyone will change to another city. Otherwise, just directly blood sacrifice, its breath has a lot of blood smell. Beside the Lord of Thunder, the 2 highest-ranking disciples looked surprised at the same time. They only found out about these situations when they arrived at the local area, and they even hacked to death several of the totem god's subordinates. The scar on Archmage Baebo's face was scratched by a golden cat. Alas, it's really hard to fight when the legendary golden cat comes charging. And Gretel didn't get any information in advance, so he got this just by induction? There was heavy breathing in the room. Even the two disciples who followed the battlefield took the time to feel the breath of the divine crystal. After a while, the Lord of Thunder put away the divine crystal and knocked on the table. Okay, let's start the report. Gretel, you come first. I knew it was like this. I knew I couldn't escape. Greet reached out and touched the space bag, and 7 or 8 stacks of papers appeared in his hand. In an instant, everyone's eyelids were twitching from Archmage Baebo down. A stack of paper is a paper. It has only been 2 months since I left, and you have produced 7 or 8 papers. Did you use copying to write your papers? Even if I copy it, I won't copy it so fast. The Lord of Thunder looked calm and listened to Gretel's report one by one. 2 papers on obstetrics and gynecology, the conclusion of the rabies vaccine project, and the phased results of the clinical trial of streptomycin. These are just titles, and everyone just listens to them. It wasn't until the soil test paper came out that the Lord of Thunder became a little more serious. The method is not difficult, but the idea is good. He nodded gently and glanced at all the disciples one by one. You should also learn from it and use more brains when doing things. Don't just think about brute force cracking. Especially Baebo, if you can use a little more thought this time. Archmage Baebo showed a painful expression. On the side of the cheek, 3 scratches were twisted like caterpillars, but they instantly returned to their original shape due to pain. The disciples collectively bowed their heads. The Lord of Thunder snorted unsatisfied and looked at Gretel. This is a key project for the council right now, and you can finally help. Continue. He did not comment on the ammonia synthesis project, but showed a little interest in CT and asked Greet to keep the paper and look back at it. It was the direct current cardioversion project that made the Lord of Thunder take a second look and reach out for the paper. After reading 10 lines at a glance, he made 2 copies and threw them to the 2 oldest disciples. You all participate in this project together. Before embarking on the road to legend, if you know more about your body, the road will be more stable. 3,000 words. Another update completed. There are 2 months left to vote and more updates, and it will be completed soon. Yeah. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. Thanks to @Mwijinlan for the 100 starting coins. Thanks @Mabai for the 100 reading points. Pia new book, starting from Na Yiniang, Infinite Flow to the Heavens, similar to the style of Gohuaniao. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 763. The brothers and sisters collectively turned their heads and saluted Gretel with their attention. Gretel bowed his head slightly to greet them, a little sweat leaking out of his vest silently. I really only have a partial understanding of cardiac myoelectricity and the electrophysiological changes when the heart beats. There is no comparison between me and those big guys doing basic research. Even in my previous life, I was only responsible for stabilizing the situation here. When encountering really complex and critical patients, I would immediately call my heart and come down for consultation as quickly as possible. Moreover, the electrophysiology of the heart also involves cell transmembrane potential and so on. How can I explain to my brothers and sisters, or prove to them that the potential of the working cells of the heart is related to the flow of potassium ions, sodium ions, and calcium ions respectively? The book only contains the conclusion. I didn't talk about how it was proven in the first place. In our clinical treatment, we only need to be able to use instruments and administer medicine. For things beyond our capabilities, call a specialist. Moreover, senior brother Baebo has begun to develop into a legend. If I prove wrong and cause him to have an accident during the elementalization process, wouldn't it mean that I have harmed him? That's the heart, the heart. Fortunately, the Lord of Thunder rescued him. The teacher coughed lightly and asked seriously, "Do you have any difficulties with this project?" "There are many difficulties. In particular, this DC cardioversion and my 2 subsequent plans both require guidance from the teacher." As expected, the Lord of Thunder chose the difficult path for Gretel. He didn't even look at making magic props or anything, and went straight to research new magic. Your electrocardiogram is a level 1 magic, and the electric claw is also a level 1 magic. It's not difficult to connect them. If you don't need the cloud screen. He looked at Greet inquiringly. Gretel nodded first, then shook his head. It's better to keep the cloud screen. Although you don't need to look at the cloud screen to activate the electric claw, it is best for the healer to see the subsequent effects and responses so that he can deal with it further. Is it okay if there is no display screen on the ED? Is it okay if I can't see the ECG on the display? If possible, Greet would even like to include screen displays and voice prompts to instruct rescuers on how to operate step by step, where the electrode pads should be attached, and whether to press and shock. Well, actually, all of these can be included in the magic bag, together with external cardiac compressions. A magic shot, external cardiac compression, artificial respiration, electric defibrillation/electrical cardioversion, a set of procedures, automatic judgment, and automatic execution. Well, when the patient has lost consciousness, heartbeat, and breathing, is there any use in treating moderate injuries/treating serious injuries, or throwing healing techniques into the heart? It seems to be a little bit, but it consumes a lot of money. The defibrillation/electrical cardioversion magic package is valuable as long as it consumes less than the treatment spell. The Lord of Thunder nodded, confirming his request. Then, without thinking, he gave a large list of books. Detailed explanation of the nesting of magic circles, Roberto Oliva, 796, 3rd edition. The Time the Magic Triggers, Treve Duffy, 1073. Judgment and Planning for Spell Construction, Cynthia Augustus, 855. Greet kept writing and copied more than 10 books in one go, wanting to wail very much. A month passed just by reading more than a dozen books. If after reading it, you also need to thoroughly understand the content, practice it, and use it without any hindrance. Let me die. Why do I feel like I'm back in the postgraduate stage? The teacher just throws down a book list whenever he disagrees with me. Then, at the next group meeting, your speech must show that you have read and understood these reference books. Looking left and right, I saw that the senior brothers and sisters in front of me were all sitting very still, not squinting. Obviously, everyone came here like this, and no one thought there was anything strange about Gretel's experience. In other words, doing research with the legendary mage is about the same as working in the group of academicians in the previous life. Full professors and doctoral supervisors are just small bosses, and associate professors may be only second-level bosses. What, you are just an undergraduate? Because the school is good, the talent is good, and the big boss likes it, so he was admitted? Then you have to go through such training, there is no need to run. What's more, Greet felt that as he was already a 7th-level mage, with several followers under his command, and 2 research groups, he could at least be considered a graduate student. Maybe, in terms of research, you can even reach the associate professor level. So the teacher gave you a book list, so just try to read it. After reading this, you might be able to develop new magic. It is better to burn new magic into a scroll or a chip and then make it into a magic prop than to simply give 2 magic spells and then let the transformation system make it into a magic prop. Obviously, the latter is more convenient, but in the former, the creator has a stronger say. For example, if I want to open up licensing, then open up licensing. If I want to lower the price, then lower the price. Want to protest? Sorry, you are just an OEM. Greet silently clenched his fists. Last time he developed electrocardiogram magic and connected the cloud screen with measurement, it was MS Silver Dragon who helped. This time, he had to work hard to do it himself. By the way, can you feel the electric current in your heart? The teacher continued to ask. Gretel immediately shook his head. Are you kidding me? Why can I feel myoelectricity? I use magic to measure everything. Or give me a set of electrode equipment that, if sensitive enough, can detect it? Purely by perception? No. You can't do this, the Lord of Thunder ordered very simply. You are a level 7 mage. Your perception cannot be so weak. Your senior brothers and sisters can already sense electrons. You cannot even sense electric current. Go back and practice. Within a month, you must at least rely on your spirit. You can feel the electricity. No one could see how this legendary mage was acting. In the office, a blue-white electric arc suddenly surged. Intertwined and connected, they form a concrete and subtle maze. In the maze, small electric balls rolled happily around, crackling and exploding from time to time. After 1 month, if you can't get out of this maze with your mental strength, then when will you finish walking? When will you enter my study again? The brothers and sisters in front silently cast sympathetic glances at Greed. It's over, everyone has tried the taste of this thing. If you don't have enough mental strength, you will suffer a lot after walking around. Greed is still a 7th level mage, and the teacher will not be harsh, but he will probably shock him 17 or 18 times until his whole body becomes paralyzed and he falls to the ground with wisps of black smoke emitting, right? And he is also a priest, who can heal himself and recover quickly. Perhaps, he will be electrocuted several times more, or even dozens of times. Gretel, T. But he also knew that he could not hold on to the knowledge of his previous life forever. The higher you go, the greater the proportion of magic and the supernatural world. Hey, improving perception is actually a good thing. He also wanted to be able to directly feel the electron flow like his brothers and sisters. In that case, if you hit an electron beam on the sample, wouldn't it be possible to do a physical scanning electron microscope? He nodded honestly. Teacher, don't worry, I'll practice as soon as I get back. I'll practice right away. I'll set up a special training room and let Moss pull the wires, stagger them into a network, and discharge them from large to small, from strong current to weak current. I'll cover my eyes and unfold the spiritual power moves inside. In an instant, the eyes of the senior brothers and sisters fell on him, burning to the point of almost scorching heat. Big dog owner. A big dog owner with a tower spirit. A big dog owner with a tower spirit to help pull wires, discharge electricity, and control the size of the current. When we practiced this, we all relied on our own efforts, begged Grandpa and Grandma, and went to the transformation system to sense the properties of various materials and ores. How much work does it take for the transformation department to do this? Otherwise, it's a matter of climbing to the top of the mountain during a thunderstorm to feel the lightning. Otherwise, just make good friends in groups and release magic to each other, which is very troublesome, and you also owe a lot of favors. Not to mention that some people have crippled hands and extremely poor accuracy, and the human body strokes become direct hits. Even if it is an apprentice-level magic, it will be very painful if it hits the body. Greed completed the task, made the pledge, and finally passed the test. Next, the senior brothers and sisters stood next to each other and took turns reporting on their recent study and research results. Even the 2 senior brothers and sisters who followed were no exception. Only then did Gretel realize that while the teacher and the other legends were surrounding and killing the demigods, the 2 senior brothers and sisters also undertook an arduous task. Senior brother Baebo took the lead, presiding over the magic circle in the southeast and intercepting the subordinates of the demigod totem beast on the periphery. Under the explosion of Yang Yan, everything was destroyed. Only a few high-level ones rushed over desperately and fought with the senior brothers at close range. Senior sister Vilbai was further out, and the electromagnetic field spread out, covering the entire land silently. The raging tide of beasts, those lower-level snakes, rats, insects and ants that relied purely on the sheer number of them, one by one, could not get close to the inner layer of her defense circle. If it hadn't been for a moss monster suddenly rising up and jumping onto her shoulder, she would have been able to win without any injuries this time. So, how many high-level monsters did you kill this time? Gretel was still thinking about this issue on the way out of the Lord of Thunder's study. In the study room, the two older disciples who were left alone were reading the papers line by line, and the more they read, the more frightened they became. Archmage Baebo said impatiently. "Teacher, this magic. How? This is a very powerful attack magic." Archmage Baebo crackled his fingertips, and electric sparks flashed slightly. Use an electric current that is not very strong, seize the right moment, and pass through the heart all at once to cause cardiac arrest. It may not be useful for magicians with full defenses, but for warriors and warcraft. A first-level electric claw hitting the knight might only paralyze and freeze him for half a second. But what about the first-order electric claw, which was timed according to Gretel's research and hit the knight? What is the result of cardiac arrest? That can seal the victory in one fell swoop, and it can even be fatal. Archmage Philby said nothing. However, the skirt of this female magician who specializes in electromagnetic fields fluttered automatically without any wind. She was obviously very excited. Being able to achieve great results at a very small cost is what every magician pursues. Okay. The Lord of Thunder suddenly stopped. He looked from left to right, then from right to left, and his eyes swept over the two disciples one by one. If you want to study this attack magic, you can study it yourself. However, you are not allowed to publish papers or teach it casually. Especially, no one is allowed to mention it in front of Gretel. Others researched ways to treat illnesses and save people, but we used them to kill people. You can use them if you want, but try to hide them. Teacher, you are too partial to little Gretel. 3,000 words. Half of the update is completed. I got the premium badge today, I'm so happy, la 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 la. From now on, I will also have a premium book. Thanks to @manfi for the 100 starting coins. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 764. Greet waited impatiently outside the door of the teacher's study room. After a long time, my legs felt sore from standing, and then I waited until the study door opened, and the two senior brothers and sisters came out one after another. Little Greet? What are you doing? Archmage Baebo stopped and was slightly surprised. Gretel turned his head slightly, stared at his cheek, and raised his hand to grab it. Leaning over him again, his eyes fell on the senior sister's shoulders. I'll accompany you to the doctor. The Archmage was stunned. Then he smiled and slapped Greet on the shoulder with his thick palm. Little one. You still remember our injuries. Do you want to take a look first? Gretel stared at his face carefully and shook his head. A level 17 or 18 Archmage will never run out of medicines such American Samoa healing potions when going on a mission. Even if they are lacking during the journey, they will definitely make up for it in the few days after returning. If it cannot be cured, it means that the injury is either quite serious or there is something very troublesome. No matter what it is, it's not something he, a level 7 mage, can master. I read related books before, and I found that the injuries of high-level professionals in this world can really make the patient endure, inflict damage on the healer, and even cause a double kill. But Greet really wanted to watch it. When any doctor sees a rare case, he will try to squeeze in and take a look. He relied on the fact that the patient was his senior brother and sister, and Greet was so shameless that he followed him and got through. While messing around, I was still rubbing in the middle of my senior brothers and sisters, walking quickly and slowly, looking left and right, talking here and there. By the way, senior brother and sister, the CT project is the one that uses detection magic to rotate around people and detect the inside of the human body. How? I have told the medical branch that there is a sub-project that we may ask you to participate in. See if you are interested. Hey, little Greet, I'll give your senior brother and sister some work. Archmage Philby paused in her steps, half smiling but not smiling. What project is it? Are you sure we are available? Are you interested? I must be interested. Gretel slid down 2 steps, a little further away from her. No, senior sister's fingers are eager to try, but don't pinch his ears. Just to see if there is any way to reduce the level of the detection magic light source as much as possible. Or, to find other alternatives, such as X-ray. Damn it, you lied. Sure enough, senior brother Baebo's eyes immediately swept over. X-ray? Why do you say this should be used? What else do you know? Gretel hee. When taking plain films or doing CT, X-rays must be used. It was because we couldn't find X-rays that we used detection magic instead. But of course I can't tell the truth to my senior brother. Gretel found a reason without thinking. Because when Sarah talked about this ray, she directly summoned it, then stretched out her hand and said that she could see the bones. Although we can't see it with our eyes, I think there is always a way to see it. Well, indeed, to his surprise, Archmage Baebo nodded immediately. He has been involved in the X-ray project for almost a year and has learned a lot for a problem like how to see X-rays. A group of his disciples and grandsons worked on it alone, and they have already done it. These guys usually have nothing to do anyway. Rather than the 10 people put together being unable to match the output of Greet alone, it is better to do something for the teacher. They made a potion and put it on the film you made. When it is X-rayed, there will be an image on the film. They took turns taking pictures before, including the whole body and one hand. Gretel. Senior brother, don't be like this. Don't think it's okay to use X-rays on your body. Don't think of this as a fashion. Take a picture of yourself, take a picture of your disciples and grandsons, and then invite other magicians to come over and take a picture. In his previous life, the first group of scientists who studied X-rays were almost completely wiped out in this way. Not only that, the most popular thing in society at that time was to take an X-ray of yourself. An X-ray machine was set up in the photography studio to take pictures of the skull and hand bones. The clothing store set up an X-ray machine to take pictures of the spine and ribs. The shoe store built an X-ray machine and launched an X-ray bone shoe selection project. All kinds of tricks. Greet felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up when he thought about it. It can only be said that in terms of the spirit of seeking death, human beings can only be better at jumping, but not the best at jumping. Compared with ordinary people, magicians are at least 10 to 20 times more willing to risk their lives. Senior brother, are you wearing lead clothes? Are you really wearing lead clothes? You can't take random pictures of this thing because it's okay. Greet asked almost tremblingly. Hey, how can I prove to my senior brother that X-rays are really harmful to the human body? Should we conduct a group of animal experiments, or try to drag a prophecy mage over and let him experience it for himself? Okay, don't worry, your senior brother is not that stupid. Baelber looked at Gretel with a smile. He raised his hand and wanted to rub his hair, but finally put it down. I'm wearing lead clothes and taking protective measures. Everything will be fine. If there are really some who are really disobedient, I have no choice but to let them go. After all. The two senior brothers looked at each other and shrugged at each other. After all, even if there is a fool who pours liquid nitrogen into his stomach, you can't stop him from committing suicide. The three brothers chatted and rushed all the way to the territory of Bielsa, the editor-in-chief of the journal Medical Research and the 18th level great magician. Seeing the elevator rising slowly and about to reach the target floor, Baebo gently pushed his junior brother back. Follow us and don't wander around. Bielsa is the highest level magician in the medical branch. The courtesy he receives is always only slightly lower than that of a legend. Even if his disciples have a bad attitude, don't be angry. With a ding-dong sound, the elevator door slid open. Two young magicians, one on the left and one on the right, stood by the door, bowing slightly at the same time. Dear Archmage, please go this way. Our editor-in-chief is treating patients and will be here later. Please come inside and sit down first. In Greet's eyes, the layout of the entire waiting area is probably the waiting hall, the first clinic room, the second clinic room, the third clinic room, a total of 6 clinic rooms. The door of each room is closed, and it is not known whether there is anyone inside, whether they are diagnosing or treating. There are 2 rows of sofas in the waiting hall, about half full of people. There is no triage table outside, no guiding nurse, and no doctor patrolling around to rush to someone who is in trouble. Anyway, the casters can directly cast the healing spell, so it will probably be faster to rescue them. However, Archmage Baebo and his party were not arranged on the sofa. Instead, they passed over other patients and were directly invited into a consulting room. The therapist in the clinic politely asked them to sit down, asked about the situation one by one, and took notes. What do you call this Archmage? Archmage Baebo, level 18, affiliated with Thunderhorn? Okay, what makes you uncomfortable? Fighting a high-level monster, residual energy is left on the wound and it is not healing well? Okay, wait a moment and I will report it to the teacher, who will handle it for you as soon as possible. Your Majesty the Archmage, you, Archmage Philby, level 16, Thunderhorn. Fighting a high-level monster, the remaining life core of the monster is stained on the wound, and it cannot be removed. Can you let me take a look at the wound? Okay, I will report to the teacher later. Mage Nordmark. You came here specially. Did you discover anything new? Do you need to inform other editors? Archmage Baebo. Why are you so familiar with them after not seeing each other for 2 months? We all have to queue up when we come to see a doctor. Well, it seems that I told the medical branch that we have a project cooperation was directly communicated to the highest level healer, the editor-in-chief of medical research. Archmage Bielsa quickly finished his work and came over. While greeting each other with the Lord of Thunder, the 2 archmages also nodded to greet, with a hint of a smile in their tone. Master Nordmark, come here with your senior brother and sister? Are you so worried? I'm just here to see you. Gretel stood at the end of the table, his back straight, looking like an obedient little junior brother. I have never seen the injuries caused by high-level monsters, and I want to follow them to see. Archmage Baebo looked sideways. If Greet is a relative or friend of the patient, then of course you can watch it as you like, but you won't learn anything from watching it anyway. However, he also has another identity as a healer. Even Archmage Bielsa's own disciples cannot just watch. Do you want to see other people's experiences and techniques without paying any price? Just as he was about to say politely, I'm sorry, little Greet is still young, he saw Archmage Bielsa smile heartily and extend his palm. No problem, let's come together. Shall we go to the treatment room? Gretel didn't recognize most of the magic tools in the treatment room. Only, above the treatment bed in the middle, hung a big shadowless lamp. It can be moved throughout the house, the height can be adjusted from 1 meter to 2.5 meters, the angle can be adjusted 360 degrees, The aperture can be adjusted 1-3 turns. Cold Light Deluxe version, with 108 eternal bright flame silver rods. Greed himself only took one sample and was reluctant to pay for a second one. Archmage Baebo lay down on the treatment bed. Just when he was about to close his eyes and receive treatment, he suddenly turned his head and flicked it in Greed's direction. At the same time, the other two archmages took action at the same time, and the three magical forces met together silently. They were all high mage armors, colliding with each other, and none of them fell on Gretel. The three monks had no water to eat. Greed silently cursed, filling himself up with defenses. Senior Sister Filby was still uneasy, so she pulled him back, blocked him with her body, and threw a secret eye. Just look at it this way. Stay away from him. Those 3 scratches are not good things. Before he finished speaking, endless black light burst out on Archmage Baebo's cheek. Even though Greed was hiding behind his senior sister, the mage armor was still clanging and making several sinister sounds in succession. If I do this myself, I'm afraid I'll be beaten to death on the spot. 3,000 words. Another update completed. Only the last one left. Crying, an abnormality was found in the door next door. I came to resample, bad luck, it will be sealed for another 14 days, panic.jpg. Stretch out your paws to comfort me, please subscribe, please give me monthly tickets, please recommend votes, please book reviews, please ask for all kinds of things. Thanks to @Bawishan people for the 5,000 starting coins reward. Rewards on Apple mobile phones should be done through the web as much as possible. If you use Apple mobile phones directly, the author's income will be discounted, and the reward will arrive 3 months later. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 765. Gretel stuck his head out from behind his senior sister and tried hard to look at the treatment bed. Although the senior sister has used the mystic eye, seeing the mystic eye screen is not as clear as observing it with the naked eye. The principle of the secret eye seems a bit like a camera. In short, the imaging effect is distorted and different from what is seen with the normal naked eye. Although it can be adjusted using the feeling of the endoscopic field of view, but why do you have to do mental arithmetic when you can see with the naked eye? It's not like senior sister can't protect herself. Take it back, a palm on top of his head pressed down, forcing Gretel to squat. It's not the hand of a mage, it's not the hand of a powerful mage, it's not even the hand that the senior sister stretches out behind her back. That hand was composed of a translucent force field. It was huge, extremely huge, and it pressed down, overwhelming the sky and the earth. At a glance, it can be seen that it is one of the series of large hands of the plastic energy field, such as the tripping palm, the assault palm, the protective palm, and so on. Thanks to senior sister, this slap is very gentle. If you turn on the attack mode, you can stick Gretel to the wall. Don't stick your head out, Archmage Filby flicked her fingertips back, and another layer of armor hung on Greet's body. Then, the force field hand lowered and held him firmly in the palm of his hand. The senior sister's voice became more severe. Squat down. If you don't see clearly, use your mental power. Use your senses to see. Greet squatted silently in the big hands to prevent his senior sister from getting angry again, and used the big hands to crush himself like a frog. Stare at the secret eye screen, extend your mental power, and try to see. Senior sister's energy field is so strong. The energy on the shoulder is full of vitality, seeping out from under the holy water bandage. What on earth is it? The scratches on senior brother Baebo's cheek, oh, I was distracted and scattered. I have to look at it again. He used his spiritual power again and approached cautiously. Before they even touched her, there was a sudden pop sound on her forehead, as if she had been whipped out of thin air. Senior sister Filby stood in front with her hands behind her back, without looking back, and said calmly. Be careful and don't poke too far out. That thing is dangerous. Greetano kept saying. This time, he imagined thinning, stretching, and stretching the threads of spiritual power. It's slender to the limit, and then stretches forward, getting closer bit by bit. Another feeling like an electric shock. This time, Greed finally confirmed. The place closest to the wound was wrapped in a layer of jumping thunder and lightning, flashing densely and intertwining into a network. Greed tried hard to dodge the spiritual thread and walked inward from the thunder net. Go in a little more, go in a little more, no, the mesh in front is too thin and I can't get through it. But how else to do it? Just pulling the mental power thread to this point is already the limit. He was deeply attracted by the injury of his senior brother and the condition of the wound that he had never seen before. Greed's heart skipped a beat. She retracted the mental power thread and folded it in the middle. Then, fix the folded ends and shake them up and down. Oh, it's stretched. Stretched twice as long, twice as long. Fold it again and shake it again. Archmage Baebo, who was on the treatment bed, turned his head slightly and exchanged glances with his junior sister, both of whom were a little surprised. The method of extending spiritual power threads is neither popular nor niche. Each family has its own method. There are 7 or 8 common methods of the Thunder Horn, as well as the secrets of the Lord of Thunder. However, I have never seen Gretel before. Did the teacher teach him something new? Not so. If the teacher had taught him a long time ago and made no progress after 2 months, there would be no way he would be spared like this today. Greed pulled the mental power thread once or twice using a noodle method. When he felt that it was thin enough, he moved forward. This time, I finally passed through the thunder net smoothly and found the wound of Archmage Baebo. Woo! His whole body was shaken. In the mental induction, what is that deep, dark thing? As soon as the silk thread touched it, the thing crawled over. Fortunately, Gretel withdrew the induction in time. After exiting the thunder net, there was a soft crackle in the consciousness, and a section of the thread seemed to be burned away. But thank God, that deep and dark thing was burned away along with the threads and did not extend over. As for the life force, Gretel did not feel it inside the wound. Fortunately, he didn't feel it, otherwise he would probably have to find a way to take a sample from inside the wound. As for whether the cotton swabs used for sampling will be blown up, there must be a way from the car to the mountain. Have you finished reading? You know you can't touch this thing, right? 2 feet in front of him, the senior sister still had her back to him, asking in a cold tone. Greet nodded repeatedly. I've finished reading. Thank you, senior sister. Fortunately, senior sister's thunder net protects me, Emma. If no one is protecting me, I will die this time. The alien energy entrenched in the wound was far beyond what Gretel could handle. Even Archmage Bielsa found it difficult to deal with it. The healing mage used his mental power to explore it and frowned. This thing is too dangerous. My mental power can only determine its approximate boundaries, but not how deep it is. As soon as the healing power touched it, its reaction was very violent, and this area on the face was very easy. Something went wrong. He turned to Gretel hesitantly. You're here just in time. Can your spell called CT be used on this? Maybe, Gretel wasn't sure either. The principle of CT is to use a powerful light source to pass through the human body and create a virtual image by analyzing the density differences of different tissues. Now that the wound has a strong energy reaction, is CT useful? Maybe. If it's not the healing power, will other energies touch it? If not, let's go and scan it. He made a thoughtful suggestion. Archmage Bielsa tried it with his own hands and confirmed that there was no problem. The group of people walked toward the center of the mage tower. The Archmage set up the relevant equipment, and Gretel squatted beside it, waiting for the image to come out, never interfering without authorization. He had seen the patient last time. The image fed back by the high-level mage using detection magic was too bright for his meditation world to catch. Forget it, let's wait for the results here in Taling. In this world, level is everything. Archmage Bielsa and the medical mages have invested a lot in CT magic. Detection magic swept through, and Archmage Baebo sat on the floating disc in the center and rotated in a circle. The tower spirit produced an image within an hour. 3 strong energy reactions were pressed on the outside of the cheek and above the cheekbone. From the gaps in the bright white energy network, strands of dark color leaked out, piercing into the muscle layer and floating above the cheekbones. From time to time, the dark threads want to go deep, but are swept away by the bright white energy, colliding with each other and annihilating them. The bright white energy layer was unable to advance, so it had to remain in a stalemate with it without attacking. Archmage Bielsa looked very fascinated. Next to him, 2 patients stood side by side, watching with him. Is this okay? Can you kill it? I'm afraid not. Archmage Bielsa said with a troubled face, you can see the bones clearly in this picture, but you can't see the tiny blood vessels. There are too many blood vessels on the face. Greet moved her lips. One thing to say is that to see clearly blood vessels, nerves, and other tissues, MRI is more reliable. After all, CT is far behind. However, there are remedies. If you just want to see the blood vessels, you can do angiography. If you want to see the nerves, the things that make the face feel and direct its movement, this is more difficult. Maybe, senior brother, you can feel it yourself and mark it on the picture? That is actually also electrical signal transmission. Isn't it said that one of the steps on the road to becoming a legend is elementalization? Since we want to elementalize it, maybe, we can perceive the nervous system more accurately. Greet quickly took out the papers and began to distribute them. Archmage Bielsa and 2 senior brothers and sisters waved their hands together. The angiogram. We've all seen it. If you think it's useful, just do it again. Gretel secretly thanked himself for pushing CT to the point of automatically collecting information. Otherwise, like the first version, you can take one look, take a note, take another look, and take another note. A CT with terrible accuracy may be possible, and angiography will basically be useless. He squatted at the feet of his senior brother, huddled as much as possible so as not to block the rays of the magic light source. He is responsible for injecting holy water, Archmage Philby is responsible for turning the floating disc, Archmage Bielsa is responsible for presiding over the CT, do it again. An hour later, the second version of the image was presented to everyone. The network of blood vessels is thick and thin, crisscrossing and branching like a spider web, winding through the muscles. Archmage Baebo closed his eyes slightly, feeling the subtle signals on his face. Finally, I personally added some thin fork strands to Silent Phantom. Gretel had to say that although it was still a little rough, most of the instructions were correct. With the image, Archmage Bielsa was in high spirits. He directed the treatment force to sweep the periphery first, and then lightly attached it to the surrounding blood vessels, nerves, and muscles in advance to protect it. Next, it is to penetrate into the inside of Luang bit by bit. The gentle healing power, through the thunder net, comes into contact with the dark power within. Occasionally, a bit of debris explodes through the thunder net, causing a little damage, but is annihilated and healed in time by the healing power waiting around. Gretel watched intently and breathlessly. The scratches gradually become shallower, shorter, thinner, and then disappear. Next, it's the second black scratch's turn, shrinking little by little and disappearing little by little. Okay, Archmage Bielsa closed his eyes tightly and swayed. This thing is really difficult to treat. If I hadn't seen clearly where the blood vessels underneath are, I really wouldn't have dared to take action. He muttered. Greet pursed her lips and swallowed back the words. Being so careful, you couldn't have treated it before and accidentally exploded it, right? Anyway, I got one. Hey, I just don't know what kind of injury is on senior sister's shoulder. 3,000 words. The last update is half done, so happy. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. Thanks to Ed for the 1,500 starting coins. The results came out today. The door next door is not on the list, and I was not asked to do the nucleic acid test again. It seems safe. Now we are waiting for the community group purchase of vegetables, eggs and fruits. There are not many vegetables, and there are only 5 eggs left at home. Panic. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 766. Healing the wound on Archmage Baebo's cheek, the 18th level healer was already sweating profusely. I wiped my sweat and sighed to Master Baebo. This injury is really difficult to treat. Such a high strength texture, a dark and bloody smell, really, it's so close that I won't be able to cure it all at once. Archmage Baebo thanked him profusely and gave him a gift, a pair of front paws of the golden cat, as a small token of appreciation in addition to the medical fee. Archmage Bielsa took the cat's claw and looked left and right, and suddenly realized. So you were injured like this. No wonder. I thought dash. Having said this, I quickly swallowed it back. Baebo's face froze. What do you think? Archmage Bielsa smiled coquettishly and did not answer, but his eyes slipped towards the lady next to him. Gretel quickly bit her lip and suppressed her smile. Where did this go? The grape trellis fell down? Or was he caught by a succubus or something like that and got a claw on his face? It is said that the status of doctors in this world is really high, and I really dare to say it. In his previous life, if the doctor dared to speak so openly, it would be a trivial matter to be complained about, and if he was punched in the face, he would probably not be able to deal with it. Archmage Bielsa obviously felt that the atmosphere was a bit awkward, so he started a conversation and changed the subject. He held his front paw, which was larger than his own hand, and looked left and right, pinched a nail and pushed it out, exclaiming. This high-level monster is not easy to mess with. Judging from the degree of its strength, if it goes one step further, it will become a demigod, right? No matter what, he is still a beast. He has not taken this step, but he is still easy to fight. Archmage Baebo smiled proudly. Turning his eyes sideways, he saw Gretel staring at the pair of paws without blinking, and reached out to pat his shoulder. Okay, I'll leave a nail for you to play with later. You're not strong enough yet, so don't scratch your skin, do you understand? Greet, okay, thank you, senior brother. I don't want to test my defense with it. I just want to take some samples to see if there are any special bacteria on the animals in the new world. He muttered in his mind and kept thinking about drawing circles with the cat's nails. Archmage Bielsa turned to the lady and bowed slightly. Madam, let's take a look at your situation. There is a dressing room here. Can you go and change clothes first so that we can treat you? Ah, no need. Archmage Philby smiled heartily. No one could see how she moved. The long skirt on her body deformed quietly, and the sleeve on her left shoulder shrank, becoming a narrow strip hanging around her neck. The entire left arm, including the bandaged shoulder, was completely exposed, all the way to the end of the collarbone. The bandage automatically flew up, 1 circle, 2 circles, 3 circles. Gretel took a deep breath. The round and white shoulders are covered with dark green moss, which is terrifyingly colorful. As soon as it saw air, or in other words, as soon as it lost the suppression of the bandage, it immediately stood upright tremblingly, growing when it saw the wind. Greet even saw 2 dark green mosses next to each other, with their leaves touching. There was a pop and a gentle bubble sound, and a small clump of moss suddenly grew on the floor next to it. Ruined. Gretel gasped. Moss, it reproduces with spores. Spores are floating all over the sky. It would be okay if they floated to the floor, but if they floated to people's lungs. Gretel. Back off. The two senior brothers and sisters gave orders at the same time. While talking, he already took action. Archmage Baebo waved a flame shield, fell to the ground, and caught the moss upside down. Archmage Philby flicked her nails, and the air was shattered with lightning and lightning. In the crackle, an unknown number of spores were blown to ashes on the spot. At the same time, a layer of soft and bright flame clothes fluttered and spread out against Gretel's body. It grew from small to large, from the inside out. Before Gretel could react, the 3 feet around him had been swept away. He did it once and opened a golden red light mask. Gretel. Senior brother is mighty. Senior sister is mighty. He took 3 steps and 2 steps at a time, rushed behind his senior brother, and hid tightly. Archmage Bielsa frowned and looked at the moss on the lady's shoulder for a while, then used his mental strength to sense it, and said hesitantly. It looks like this can only be cut out with a knife. Madam, I didn't know you. No problem. Come on. Then wait a moment. I'll go to Black Crow Swamp and invite a friend over. I'm not good at cutting knives on the human body. It's best to invite a necromancer to come over. Gretel once again popped up from behind his senior brother. Archmage Bielsa's lips moved slightly. After a moment, he heard the sound of opening and closing the door outside. It was obvious that a student had gone out to look for someone. I'll do it. I'm familiar with this. Don't make trouble. The senior brothers and sisters scolded him in unison. Archmage Baebo simply shook his hand, and the layer of flame clothing suddenly tightened, wrapped around Greet and dragged him back. Stand away. In front of this kind of thing, it's already a lot of trouble for us to save your life. Wio, the strength is too low, this is the kind of place that causes trouble. Gretel lowered his head in annoyance. The level is too low, and he is not even qualified to observe the operation. He has to rely on his senior brothers and sisters to protect him. Surgery is even more impossible. Although the senior sister is a magician, not a warrior, she is a level 16 great magician, and her body has been strengthened countless times. He probably can't even cut the skin. Cutting and treating at the same time, joking and squeezing him dry at the same time, probably won't cure him. When he was frustrated, Archmage Bielsa had turned away, his lips twitching slightly. A wave of messaging technique drifted past, and the sound of opening and closing the door was immediately heard outside. It was obvious that a student ran out and went to the Tower of Sleeplessness next door to invite someone. But Greet still wanted to struggle. He bent his left leg forward and pushed his right leg straight behind him. He used all his strength to resist Yan Yi's drag and argued loudly. I can do it. I really can. I don't have to do it myself. I can put a skeleton in it and help the Archmage, pull hooks, hand over hemostats, and be an assistant. I'll be in the next room, just watch with my secret eyes. Archmage Bielsa did not want to get involved in the debate within their section. Seeing that the dark green moss on the ground had been burned away, he took out the hands of 2 mages, carefully shoveled the ashes, and carefully put them in a box. This is a high-level plant that can hurt the Archmage. Even the residue is valuable, so you must collect it carefully. Outside the moss circle, a flame shield rose on the spot, weaving a flame net around Gretel and continuing to drag it outward. Gretel struggled hard. If you go to the people in Black Crow Swamp, they will let me get started. If you don't believe me, just ask. I gave them a lecture. In the big lecture hall. It's the deep circle with many layers on it. Lecture hall. With a bang, the door closed in front of him, and the flame net dissipated. The piece of flame clothing is still gently wrapped around the body, flickering on and off, as if to say, "Do you dare to rush in and try again?" Gretel really didn't dare. "If I kiss my senior brother, I won't burn him to death, but I will really teach him a lesson. For example, burn off a piece of skin and create a few wounds that can be healed. Wait, the people from Black Crow Swamp will bring him in anyway, right? Hey, weak strength, no human rights?" Gretel looked at the door dejectedly, hoping that someone familiar from Black Crow Swamp could bring him in. Hey, even if he has mastered the secret eye, he can float in and take a look. Wait, before the people from Black Crow Swamp arrive, we can at least complete the inspection. He raised his voice. Let's do a CT scan first. Or at least take a plain X-ray. Anteroposterior and lateral X-rays. Use detection magic to see where the moss has taken root. It's good to know when you use the knife. It would be great if CT could produce results within 15 minutes. Greet doesn't think it would take an hour for people from Black Crow Swamp to arrive. In fact, it does not take more than a quarter of an hour for the people from Black Crow Swamp to arrive. Come and use a knife, come and use a knife on a great mage. What a rare experience that is, no one will give up. In less than 20 minutes, that is, a group of people went to the center of the mage tower downstairs to take a video, Greet directed, taking pictures from the front, side, and various directions. When they came back in a grand manner, they were tumbling in black robes. Floated over. The visitor greeted Archmage Bielsa familiarly and nodded to the two people from Thunderhorn. Then, when he saw Gretel, he was obviously stunned. "Mage Nordmark? Are you here too?" "You." There was a bit of doubt in his voice, and he turned his head and scanned the faces of Archmage Bielsa and others. Gretel dubbed them silently in his heart. "What should I do if he is here?" Archmage Bielsa coughed and said nothing. The senior brother gave Gretel a hard look. "What are you looking at? You are standing outside. If you are not strong enough, you are not allowed to come in. This place is too dangerous for you." Gretel, T. Greet's only consolation was that his senior brother at least gave him a secret eye and asked him to watch from a distance. He was then pleased to see that disinfection protocols were well implemented in Black Crow Swamp. Wash it with soapy water, wipe it with alcohol, and wash it with saline solution mixed with holy water. Well, although using saline instead of iodine seems to be effective in disinfection and sterilization, it is just a bit luxurious. Then, the magician from Black Crow Swamp retreated far to the wall, released a dark gold skeleton, and came over with a scalpel to prepare for the operation. Gretel. Prepare the skin. Prepare the skin. If you go under the knife on your shoulders, theoretically, all the hair under your armpits will be shaved off. Forget it, it won't be a big problem if you don't shave. You can just rinse it with holy water a few times. Gretel was very self-aware. If he shouted that he wanted to shave his armpits at this time, the senior sister might fly out a mage's hand and hit him all over the head. He honestly shut up. In the operating room, disinfected and anesthetized, the necromancer in charge carefully manipulated the dark gold skeleton to perform the first and second cuts. Blood suddenly gushes out from one side of the blade, instantly turning the field of surgery red. The moss on Archmage Philby's shoulder immediately grew out along with the blood. "Well?" the black-robed mage called hesitantly from inside. "Mage Nordmark, how about you come and take a look? 3,000 words. 10,000 rewards plus more have been paid off. I can finally relax a bit tomorrow. It is said that building 3 next door has tested positive and may have to be closed for 14 days. I hope that the vegetables, eggs and fruits that I made today will arrive soon. It is said that the vegetables and eggs will arrive tonight, but they refuse to deliver the fruits and say they will arrive tomorrow. As long as the goods arrive, you can survive for 14 days. Crying loudly. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 767. The moment he saw the dark green moss expanding, Gretel's hair went up. Wipe. Moss reproduces through spores. Who knows whether the stuff will flow along the blood vessels, into the heart, and throughout the body, taking root in all kinds of tiny places. In the magical world, moss can grow on the flesh and blood of a level 16 great magician. Who knows what it can do? He jumped forward, he screamed when he was burned by the flames, and instinctively shrank back. Then he summoned the hands of two high mages, hammering the door while shouting. Block the blood vessels. Block the blood vessels. If it's too late, block the veins returning to the heart first. Block the lymphatic vessels. If you can't find it, go down the lymph nodes in the neck and look for the thick tubes next to the largest lymph nodes. Let me in. Everything else is easy to deal with. Skin, muscles, and bones are all easy to deal with. Anyway, their internal circulation depends on other tissues. The blood vessels and lymphatic system are the most susceptible to foreign invaders traveling up the pipes. The door creaked open. The flame clothes wrapped around him fluttered and stretched forward, giving him room to move forward. Gretel noticed that there was no gap in the flame coat itself. Senior brother Baebo is really vigilant in protecting his own safety. Alas, I really have to work hard to improve my strength in the future. When a qualified therapist sees a patient, he should be able to go up and perform surgery, instead of being isolated far away and having others protect him. Gretel quickly walked into the treatment room. He was still 10 steps away from the operating table when Yanyi suddenly tightened his clothes. The front of Gretel showed a bright golden red color, and he announced the threat with his teeth and claws. Don't come over here. Don't come here. Sure enough, senior brother spoke. Greet thought for a moment, then released the silver skeleton first and let it take 2 steps forward. Sure enough, the 2 sides of Yanyi were pulled in the middle, forming a gourd shape, separating him from the skeleton. Then, Gretel was still tightly sealed, and the flame clothing spread out in front of the skeleton, and a new road appeared. Yanyi even transformed into an arrow and pointed forward. Senior brother, I have eyes and I can see. Greet silently cursed and directed the silver skeleton to move forward and stand next to senior sister Philby. Master Archmage, don't worry, I will be your assistant. Well, the blood vessels around here. The silver skull held the scalpel and cut the skin flap with one sharp cut. Archmage Bielsa had quick eyesight and quickly released a healing spell to stop the blood on the edge of the skin. Well, not even a little bit of space can be left for that moss. Protect the wound. Cover the incision with gauze soaked in holy water. The scalpel floated to the side, and the mage's hands used blunt separation to pull apart the subcutaneous fat. Pull, pull, it can't be pulled. Gretel flew out of the surgery box silently. Fortunately, he hadn't been lazy before and found a dwarf to build a full set of mithril-infused tools. Otherwise, the powerful mage's hand won't be able to pull her away, and it will be too late to cry again. Separate, clamp blood vessels, separate, clamp blood vessels. Various surgical instruments were swaying in the hands of the silver skeleton. The Archmage of Black Crow Swamp stood beside him, and he had completely become a tool for pulling hooks. No bleeding here. There's no bleeding here. Here, he actually didn't cut it with a knife, but used the strange pliers to hold it and carefully spread it open little by little. It makes sense. In this case, the blood vessels and muscles are stuck together and will not be cut off, causing heavy bleeding. Here, hey, the hemostatic forceps reached down and clamped it accurately. How did Master Nordmark know that there was a small blood vessel here? Fortunately, he was invited in, if it were him, that layer of moss would have grown over half of his body, right? Greet himself was also very cautious, trying to minimize bleeding and exposure of wounds. At the same time, Archmage Baebo had been standing on the edge, blocking the dark green moss with a thin layer of transparent flames, trying hard to prevent the moss from spreading. The layer of flames was as thin as paper, almost transparent and pure white in color. Gretel only glanced at it, and then told the silver skeleton and the knife in its hand to hide away as much as possible. Who knows how strong that thing is? His surgical equipment was made of fine steel mixed with mithril, and might melt if touched. Ma seemed to be afraid of these flames, and huddled up with its head drooped, keeping its head down as low as possible. Greet finished blocking the most important blood vessels and lymphatic vessels, and took a deep breath. Careful, I'm about to start cutting. No problem, let's cut it. The one who responded was Master Philby, who was lying on the operating table with his eyes slightly closed. She used Gretel's invention delay pain modification to block the pain in her arm. At this moment, she closed her eyes and focused on the alien creature on her shoulder. When Gretel stretched her muscles and went deep inside, she saw a faint electric light flowing in her fascia and muscles. It was obvious that the Archmage had been using his own energy to fight off the moss on his shoulders. If not for this, a weaker being would have been eaten up by this magical plant long ago. Be careful, Archmage Baebo warned. When flesh and blood are cut off, Philby's strength will be weakened to the lowest. Protect yourself. No problem, senior brother, Greet assured loudly. He stood on tiptoes and looked around, then threw a few rounds of healing techniques on the hemostatic forceps and scalpels in the skeleton's hands. When he felt that it was not enough, he said loudly, Archmage Bielsa. Please, I can heal you at any time. Okay. Divine power leaps on the scalpel. Gretel concentrated on holding his breath, separated the contaminated skin according to what he saw on the previous X-ray film, and gently lifted it up with a hemostat. Just as a layer of dark green moss was peeled off, it suddenly exploded. Careful. In front of Gretel, on his side, behind him, and above his head, flames surged. The golden red flame turned into pure white, swallowing 3 feet around it, so bright that he couldn't see anything clearly. As for the mental power that controlled the silver skeleton, it was temporarily cut off under such a strong energy storm. When Yanyi regained his composure, Greet looked forward and screamed. My skeleton! My silver skull! The moss is all attached to it. From top to bottom, from the skull to the right hand and chest, the whole thing is wrapped in dark green. The dark green thing was still expanding rapidly, swallowing it up as it expanded, and it had grown to the leg bone. My skeleton! My scalpel! My hemostat! It was all swallowed up. Some of the most convenient surgical tools I use. What on earth is this moss? Why do you swallow everything you see? The golden red flame showed no mercy, wrapping the skull and moss together and quickly closing inward. The Archmage from Black Crow Swamp looked at him with pain on his face, and then asked tremblingly for a while. Are you still doing the surgery? Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. How relaxing it is to live without extra updates. The 20 kilograms of vegetables and 30 eggs purchased by the community group arrived today, and the 10 kilograms of mandarin oranges purchased by the group should also arrive today. If you have these, you won't be afraid anymore. I can survive another 14 days. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 768. Of course the surgery will still have to go ahead. Not to mention just losing a silver skeleton, even if the healer himself is injured, as long as he can hold on, he must hold on to the operating table until the next healer comes to take over. Although Greet felt in his previous life that he had serious cervical spondylosis, lumbar disc herniation, kidney stones, atrial fibrillation, or the flu, etc. It was really frightening for the doctor to insist on performing the operation even though he was dripping with water and taking painkiller injections. For doctors and for patients. If the pain is unbearable and falls down, it will be bad luck and it will cost both the doctor and the patient their lives. However, sometimes there is really no way. There are so many patients, and most doctors in public hospitals, especially those in tertiary hospitals, are overworked. Greet himself, in his previous life, once had his hemorrhoid surgery not long after, and when he was just getting better, he grinned and stuck his butt out, running back and forth in the emergency department. If you can save one more life, save one more life. Not to mention, all that is lost now is the silver skull. No matter how many skeletons there are, they are not worth one finger of his senior sister. Do it. Gretel released the dark gold skeleton without thinking. Seeing the skeleton moving forward, Gretel took a breath of cold air, feeling very painful. Brother, please give it a layer of protection first. If something goes wrong with this one, I won't have anywhere to fix it. Beside the operating table, the Archmage of Black Crow Swamp's face twitched. He also heard about this dark gold skeleton. It was a gift from His Excellency the Immortal. Sent. The magician of Black Crow Swamp, who wouldn't want a skeleton given by the legend of the dead? What if he was bitten by moss, not to mention the problem of repair? According to their guess, His Excellency the Immortal, he must be happy that Master Nordmark came to see him, and would not be bothered, but it is really distressing. Every necromancer will feel the pain that makes him bleed, really. Archmage Baebo also took another look at the dark gold skeleton. Forget about the previous silver skeleton, it was made by a high-level mage as a tool at best and had no consciousness. If he uses it as bait and destroys it, he can just compensate his junior brother with one more. This dark gold skeleton can't do it. Not to mention that it was a meeting gift given by legend to his junior brother. It is conscious and can grow on its own. It would be a pity to destroy it. Archmage Baebo flicked his fingers. The golden red flame clothing was gently and securely wrapped around the dark gold skull, covering every bone. Even the deep skull of the skull was flashing with golden red firelight, and it looked as if the whole thing was coming to life. Greed frowned slightly. His mental power went from needing to pass through one layer of flame clothing to 2 layers of flame clothing, and he also had to gain additional control from the dark gold skeleton, which consumed more than twice as much as before. Fortunately, he can hold on so far. I estimate that, if nothing unexpected happens, it will last about 2 hours. He operated the dark gold skeleton, picked up a new hemostat, and wanted to continue the operation. As soon as he moved, the flame silently wrapped around the hemostatic forceps, soft and snug, like a layer of gauze, but did not spit out any heat. At least Gretel didn't see any signs of deformation at the tip of the hemostat in the high temperature. Greet's heart moved. He asked the dark gold skeleton to pick up a new scalpel and put it on the handle. Then, he turned around and asked Archmage Baebo. Brother, can you wrap this scalpel in flames without damaging the blade and at the same time make the flames as thin as possible? Do you want the flame blade? Archmage Baebo remained motionless, and the flames on his flame clothes flowed naturally and stuck to the knife. A narrow edge extends from the front of the blade, less than a millimeter wide, even and flat, and the blade is as thin as paper. Is this okay? Do you want the blade to be wider? That's it, Gretel was overjoyed. There's no need to be wider, I'm not used to being any wider, senior brother, I'm doing the surgery, you have to control the flames, don't burn the inside, the outside can be burned. Especially the side facing the moss. Since this moss is afraid of flames, cutting it with flames can obviously control it. As for the problem of carbonization of the wound, a little carbonization doesn't matter. Anyway, when there was no treatment in the previous life, Electric cautery was used to stop the bleeding. Tisk tisk, that's what it tastes like. Masters who are not used to the smell of the operating room may have a hard time. It's up to you, Archmage Baebo responded angrily. Gretel controlled the dark gold skeleton, the hemostat in his left hand, and the flame knife in his right hand. While holding it, he cut carefully. With one cut, the side that is close to the normal body only fluctuates slightly, and the surface flames and lightning are intertwined. On the side leaning against the moss, the flames swept across and hugged directly upwards. It merged with the flames holding the moss above without any obstacles. Gretel's eyes lit up on the spot. This method works. If he had such strong control over elements, he would no longer be afraid of cancer cells growing and metastasizing when cutting tumors. What is scattered, what is planted and transferred, once the flames burn it, it will be clean. No. The tumor tissue is cut, and the edges need to be sent for pathological examination to determine whether there are any remaining cancer cells. Once the flame knife passes through, the tissue will be directly carbonized. Is there any need to send it for inspection? Or, instead of using a flame knife, use a frost knife, or a knife made of other elements. For example, high-frequency vibrating knife, or holy light knife, how to control this so that it can cut the tissue instead of healing it. Anyway, if there is a way to deal with this moss, surgery is easy to do. Gretel clamped the cut tissue with a hemostatic forceps and moved it aside. Sorry, there is no pathology basin, no second or third assistant, or nurse lady to come and pick up the tray in time. But the flames curved around to form a round ball, and when they moved upward, they directly smeared off the skin and flesh attached to the moss. Greet silently told herself that she had to get used to the way assistants cooperate in the magical world. He cut off the moss attached to the senior sister's shoulders carefully with one knife, and another knife, trying not to damage the healthy muscle tissue. After the last cut, the flame suddenly lit up, shrinking inwards around the moss. Leave a little. Gretel swallowed these words hard. Ah, he is not qualified to study such a dangerous thing. I don't know if senior brothers and sisters will be merciful and leave some for him to study when he has the strength to protect himself. Save a little. A clear drink. Senior sister Philby sat up from the operating table, surrounded by lightning. Amidst the thunder, Greet saw tiny bits of green being expelled from her flesh and blood, and the flames wrapped in the air and burned them up on the spot. At the same time, a beam of solidified flame wrapped around Greet's waist and dragged him backwards. Gretel, the operation is not over yet. Wait for me to take samples. Then heal the tissue and open the blood vessels. Don't drive me away now. 10 pounds of tangerines have also arrived. Victory for the stay-at-home party. You can stay at home safely for 14 days. I'll see if there are any other supplies that can be replenished in 2 days, such as apples, bananas, etc. Carrot. I hope the lockdown will be lifted smoothly in 14 days. I don't want to miss this year's peony season. I also want to eat the little cherries from Yuchang to Chongqing. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. Wagon has arrived too. Victory for the stay-at-home party. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 769. The long treatment was finally over. Greet, who was about to be drained, was weak and walked beside his senior brothers and sisters. That Yanyi is really strong. When he wears the Yanyi and controls it remotely, the mental loss is many times that of directly operating the skeleton. He also needs to be distracted to sense the situation of the alien creature in the muscles, whether it may enter the bloodstream, and whether it may enter other human tissues. Ah, can you let the dark gold skeleton carry him? He is so tired. Little Gretel, that silver skeleton, I'll pay you back later, Senior sister Archmage Philby walked slowly, the skirt of her skirt dropped slightly, without the tumbling and flying demeanor before. Obviously, the previous injuries and surgeries really made her a little tired. Gretel forced a smile and was not polite to her. My own senior sister, it's not like she can't afford it. Although Greet would rather leave him a piece of the blood-sucking moss. You can't study it, but it's still good to take a look. Even if you don't give it to him now, you can give it to him when he reaches level 10 or above. No, as if she had seen through his thoughts, Archmage Philby shook her head gently, her eyes shining brightly. I can't give you that moss. Little Gretel, before you were level 15, you couldn't even take a look at that moss unless we were around. Its essence is a level 18 moss monster. So there's still a chance to watch it, right? Greet considered her own life and acquiesced to the arrangement of her senior brother and sister. Archmage Philby sighed and patted him on the shoulder. Little Gretel, hurry up and advance. Your current ability is still far behind when it comes to treating high-level transcendental beings. Greet nodded silently. It's really not good to feel that someone close to you is injured, but you can't do anything about it, and you need someone to protect you even when you're close. It was cured successfully this time, but what if it doesn't go well next time? Little Gretel, you care so much about the safety of ordinary people that you rarely look at the higher UPS. Archmage Baebo also spoke next to him. At the level of a high-level transcendent, various energy injuries, transcendent-level creatures and toxins, conflicts and disorders of mental power, and blood distortion are the main causes of injuries. You seem to rarely care. These. Gretel lowered his head silently. It's not that I don't care, it's not that I don't understand. The nature of magic, how magic energy works in the body, what impact it will have on cells, and how to straighten it out. I don't understand any of this. You ask me how to treat it? I don't even know how to enlarge or shrink the human body, how to compress or expand the human body, whether it makes the cells larger or smaller, or more, or less. If you don't understand, of course you won't dare to reach out. Like this time, if it weren't for the fact that the injuries on the senior brothers and sisters were very simple, I wouldn't have dared to come up with ideas to help. Little Greet, you have to work harder. The group of people walked out of the auxiliary tower of the conjuration system. Burbo stopped and looked up, looking back. There are currently no legendary level healers in the council. If a legendary mage is injured, it will be very, very troublesome. Gretel nodded heavily. The teacher is also a legendary mage. The distance between a level 18 mage and a legend is not necessarily that small compared to the distance between a level 7 mage and an 18th level mage. This involves the difference in the essence of life. He couldn't handle the injuries of his senior brothers and sisters. If the teacher was injured, would Archmage Bielsa also be unable to handle it? As for the Lord of Thunder, as a legend of the energy evocation system, there is no doubt that he is the main output of the council. If a fight really breaks out, he will definitely charge forward. Greet returned to his mage tower with deep thoughts, and asked Moss to pull the copper wires and make various artificial lightning nets. He closed his eyes, pulled a black cloth over his head, added a dark spell to his forehead, and began to exercise his sensory abilities. The first step, the second step, the third step. Snap! Wrong estimate. Fortunately, Moss adjusted the output in time and adjusted the voltage on these copper wires to 12V. It was only hit a little and no injuries were caused. Greet sighed, returned to the original place, sensed again, and came again. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. Snap! Ah, it's already 220 volts of alternating current. Why is it so difficult to sense it? Does it have to be raised to 1000 volts, 2000 volts, or even higher in order to be able to sense it? But in this case, it would be difficult to sense it while standing in the room. It's safe. It's really difficult to close off one's original senses and only rely on mental power to sense. It feels like an organ has been forcibly created in one's body. Greet practiced hard for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, and half a week later, but still couldn't get started. Although the time limit given by the teacher is 1 month, if there is no preliminary results within 1 week, he feels that he will be miserable. So how should I practice perception? It's too difficult for me, I can't find the door at all. It would be great if there is some quick way. On the way from the hospital, Greet lay on the back of the silver moon deer and lamented feebly. Appa's ears perked up, and he suddenly turned around and ran out into the wilderness behind the hospital. Appa? Appa, where are you going? Greet raised his body slightly, and was knocked hard by the silver moon deer, causing him to fall down again. The 8th level monster was running at full speed. It was more exciting than racing a convertible on the highway, and the wind felt like a knife on the face. Without the long hair on the deer's neck to block the wind, Gretel always felt like a layer of skin would be scraped off his face. After running out for 15 minutes, Greet didn't recognize the surrounding scenery at all. After running out for 30 minutes, Appa jumped directly into the sea. The waves rolled up and Greet was soaked all over in an instant. Greet hurriedly added a bunch of spells such as body fixation and water breathing to himself. The silver moon deer let go of its speed and swam hard. Before the sun set, the land was already far behind. In the sunset, the silhouette of a small island rises among the waves. Appa suddenly plunged straight into the water. Undercurrents from the bottom of the sea rushed toward us, and among the rocks, schools of fish exploded in panic. Greet was buried in the deer's neck and carried through the darkness. The eyes cannot see, and the ears cannot understand the sound of running water. He naturally released his mental power, and soon he discovered an underwater cave in front of him. Appa carried him and went straight in. Rising, finally Fourhoof stepped on the waterless ground, picked up Gretel, and shook his fur beside him. Drops of water like a rainstorm hit his head and face. Gretel had no time to complain. In the darkness, his mental power opened up a beautiful picture ahead for him. In the pool and on the cave wall, there are little flowers blooming everywhere. Clear and transparent flowers that can be seen without the use of eyes. We were issued 3 copies of the antigen, 1 will be tested today, and we will be informed later. Hope it can be released soon. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 770. Greet slowly sat down against the wall of the cave. The atmosphere in this cave made him feel comfortable. Clean, cool, and peaceful. It's a bit like the feeling that after the operating room has been completely disinfected, there is still a little smell of disinfectant left. Small waves hit the edge of the cave one after another, with a regular rhythm and a little hypnosis. Gretel leaned his head back against the stone wall and slowly closed his eyes. Relax your cervical spine, relax your shoulders, and relax your spine. The spiritual power spread out, brushing the small flowers on the stone cave inch by inch. In his perception, the cave itself is dark, deep, and dense, while those little flowers are bright, active, and light. One by one, dotted all over the place. Greet suddenly smiled. When the mental power passed by, the petals of those small flowers trembled, and then they slowly closed. It feels a bit shy. And if you carefully infiltrate it with mental power, they will slowly open again. From bud, to half open, to fully open. As long as they are soaked carefully enough, they can bloom into the most complete and beautiful flowers. And it takes less than a minute to add up. Gretel felt that it was worth using a little mental energy to watch a time-lapse photography of his past life. It's a pity that the stamens can't be seen clearly. There seemed to be small particles on the top of the central stamen. When it moved, a few particles would fall out. It fell too much, and the whole flower looked wilted. Greet couldn't help but touch one little flower, and then another. The third and fourth flowers, those petals were shaking gently, and there seemed to be a cool fragrance in the air, which inexplicably relaxed his spirit after being tense all day. Greet breathed a sigh of relief and continued to touch the petals. Opening, and closing his mind, the scene he saw made him suddenly feel like he was playing chess. These little flowers, opening and closing, aren't they a natural backgammon board? You can come and play. The spiritual power poured out instantly, blowing across the large stone wall like a gentle wind. On the stone surface, the small flowers trembled and all closed. Okay, let's play chess. Fully open is white stone, half open is black stone, white stone takes one step, black stone takes one step, white stone takes one more step, black stone takes another step. The white pieces are going to connect. He's plug your head quickly. Zi changes direction and walks again. Just like this, step by step, the entire stone wall was covered with chess pieces. Black didn't win, and white didn't win either, and it seemed like he had already gone out of the 19 square range. There was a sudden neighing not far away, but it was Appa who walked to the end of the cave, stayed for a while, and then turned back. Gretel didn't need to open his eyes to feel it lower its head and bite a small flower from the ground. Is this thing for eating? Although it was a pity that he had just played with it for a long time, it was Appa who brought him to this place after all. For Appa, perhaps introducing him to the secret reserve point is to share resources with him. Look, this thing is edible. Is there any benefit to eating it? The corners of Gretel's mouth slightly curled up. With the hot air in front of him, Appa's big head came over, stuck out his tongue, rolled up the little flower and stuffed it into his mouth. Appa. If you want to eat it, I will pick it myself. Don't pick it up and stuff it into my mouth. Greet struggled hard, but he was no match for the 8th level monster simply because of his strength. I could only push hard and shout. I'll pick it myself. 11 Lulu. I picked and ate them myself. I picked enough for 10 flowers. 11 Yo-Yo. 20, 30. Eat them all here. The high-pitched neighing sound finally turned into a gentle snorting sound. Gretel reached out to push again, and this time he successfully pushed the big head away. Of course, he must keep his promise to the monster. He groped and stretched out his hand to pick the one closest to him. The stems are too short and the flowers are too small. When I pinched them with my fingertips, I pinched a fingernail of dirt. It's impossible to eat like this. Greet's mind flashed through the entire book Human Parasitology, especially roundworms, whipworms, hookworms, pinworms, and the like that breed in the soil and enter the human body with food. Parasites. Although the spells he now masters, if he is really infected with parasites, he can easily cure himself. But, it's just annoying. Gretel sighed and cast a cleansing technique on his fingertips to clean off the flower juice on his hands. The little flower that was pinched by him fell to the corner with the cleaning technique. Appa followed closely and took a cherished lick. It seems that this kind of small flower is still very rare. Appakan gave him 30 flowers. He was really generous and had a good relationship with him. In this case, not a single flower should be wasted. Greet weighed the size of her fingers, the height of the stems, and the size of the flowers, and decided to find another way. He condensed his mental power into silk thread, wrapped it around the flower stem, and gently strung it. The fragile stems immediately broke off. However, the thin flowers above made a pop sound, and the light and bright feeling in the consciousness dimmed completely. 11 Lulu. Appanate again. Lower your head and roll the flowers on the ground with your tongue. This time, it moved very gently and slowly, and Gretel could clearly see that there was a small piece of silver light between the silver moon deer's teeth and on its tongue. That is the power of light. Gretel followed suit, wrapping the flowers with the same kind of power, and then cutting them with spiritual threads. This time, the bright flowers finally flew up lightly and fell between his lips and teeth. Very comfortable feeling. Just a light touch on the tongue and it melts immediately, turning into a refreshing feeling that rushes to the brain. It felt like taking a sip of ice-cold mint water in the dog days of summer. A very slight, yet soothing feeling that cannot be ignored. The entire spiritual sea seemed to fluctuate slightly, rising by such a tiny amount. Oh, this is very useful. Thank you, Appa. Appa neighed again, raised his head and flicked his tail. Greet watched him show off with a smile, until the silver moon deer turned around and started to tap dance. No, Appa, don't move your butt. After the chaos, Gretel carefully picked 30 flowers one by one and put them into his mouth. The light little flowers turned into slurry, and then rushed into my mind. Somewhere along the way, Greet felt that his perception of the world was a little more delicate. At the very least, he could see every single grain of pollen on the top of the flower's stamen clearly as it fell. Gretel smiled. He knelt down on one knee and gently pressed his palms on the ground. Thank you very much, please continue to bloom quietly. The power of growth and nourishment passed from the palm to the ground, and soon, new buds quietly appeared on the grass stems from which the flowers had been plucked. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 771. With Appa's help, Gretel finally calmed down and began to hone his mental power and perception. Warcraft is already worried about him. It's time for him to cheer up and stop thinking about taking shortcuts. Sometimes, the shortcut is the farthest way. Greet used the last bit of free leisure time to practice. Use your spiritual power to touch the walls and stairs of the Mage Tower, touch the furniture, paper, and pen, touch the power grid pulled up by Moss. When making specimens, use mental power to penetrate little by little and touch the bones, muscles, nerves of experimental animals. Greet soon saw something different. In addition to the anatomical differences, there are more differences between the bodies of those monsters and the bodies of ordinary animals. Depending on the properties, it is more or less imbued with energy. For example, the iron skin bull has a more metallic feel to its skin and horns. For example, the wind wolf has a sense of lightness on its skin, and a new structure is formed on its hair, allowing the breeze to wrap around it more smoothly. For example, the water arrow rabbit, well, this kind of rabbit, although its muscles have been strengthened, it just feels more delicious. If Gretel didn't like spicy food, he would actually like to be a cold rabbit. While Gretel was obsessed with research, the large-scale agricultural production movement in the Kingdom of Kent had already been vigorously promoted. The elders of the Order of the God of Nature and the great mages of the School of Change worked together to cast spells and cut the piece of divine crystal into more than 100 pieces, corresponding to the places where the Order of the God of Nature was located on the east and west islands of the kingdom and several small islands of more than 100 dioceses. During that cutting process, Gretel was carried away by the Lord of Thunder to watch, and he was able to occupy a good position. The elders of the nature religion and the great mages of the change department all showed friendly smiles to him, and no one questioned what he was doing as a level 7 mage. Although Greet actually didn't understand anything, the only thing he could understand was that the cutting tool was not any of the ones he recognized. It wasn't a metal blade, it wasn't a diamond grinding wheel, it wasn't a high-pressure water jet, it wasn't a ceramic blade. Anyway, the elders and archmages stood in their respective positions according to the positions of the magic circle. Following high and low chants and prayers, soon, a meager light knife appeared in the center of the magic circle. The light knife cut straight through the power grid covering the divine crystal without any sound. Like a knife dividing water, the power grid did not fluctuate at all, but the divine crystal had split into two even pieces. Then, another knife, and another knife. So the reason why the teacher is here is to always use the power grid to control the divine crystal, right? Otherwise, are you afraid that this thing will explode or run away? The light knife continues cutting. One cut at a time, not hurriedly, according to the lines that should have been drawn in advance. The cut particles vary in size from large to small, and the color seems to vary from light to thick. Greet guessed that maybe the size of each parish was different, and the land that the order of the god of nature and the magic council could affect was different, so the amount of divine power crystals needed was also different. All in all, the divine crystal was cut into tiny gems, the smallest of which was only as big as 1 carat. The great mages of the transformation system quickly arranged a row of gold rings and set these gems on the base one by one. Gretel felt that they wanted to take this opportunity to use their spiritual power to touch these divine crystals for the last time. Anyway, can you still take the opportunity to touch it? After all, after this wave of touching is over, you will never be able to touch it again. The elders of each regional sect pulled out a vine and strung a gold ring inlaid with emerald green crystals around their necks. Then he rushed back to the parish, summoned priests to form a formation in every land that the parish could influence, and worked hard to promote birth. In the local mage tower, the mages and apprentices also walked out of the mage tower and began to organize manpower to help with drying, transportation and storage. News from all over the world are constantly being summarized in the Magic Council. The first grain has been harvested. The second batch of grain has been sown. 1 round of birthing magic every day. Before this winter comes, we will ensure that we can give birth to another batch. The whale oil has arrived on 150 ships. Herring imports from the Kingdom of the Netherlands have recently increased from 500 barrels per day to 1,000 barrels per day. After this round, the food reserves should be enough, the Lord of Thunder told his disciples easily. The new world is better. There are enough kinds of natural spirits and totem beasts, and there is a place to harvest them. Here in the old world, human beings have developed it for thousands of years, and the natural spirits have almost become extinct. The power of the Lord of Glory is also not biased towards growth. Greet thought about what he had seen on the battlefield, the destructive white light that swept everything, and nodded silently. Although they are all the power of faith, the power of each family is very different except for healing. Is it the difference in the composition of the magic itself, or is it the believer's imagination of the power of the gods that causes the difference? Moreover, he could also understand the reason why the Lord of Thunder and the others did not harvest in the northern part of the New World, but had to risk traveling thousands of miles to go deep into the area controlled by the glorious Holy See. The natural spirits on your own territory are your own resources. If you can rob someone else's property, of course you have to rob someone else's. By the way, teacher, how are they handled in the New World and our allies? The New World is simple. The Lord of Thunder's mouth curved slightly. The place was vast and sparsely populated, and there were many wild animals. On the Great Plains, there were herds of wild buffaloes, one of which could weigh a ton, load a boatload of salt to each settlement and let them marinate the beef. As for our allies, it depends on whether they are smart or not. Anyway, the Parliament's ships are always shuttled, and those who are willing to work in the New World will always have something to eat. Gretel lowered his head silently. As long as the dwarves are willing to obey orders and work for the council, there will always be food in the factory, while the barbarians. The result of going to the New World was that the complete tribes were broken up into individual people. Be hired as a useful bodyguard and thug in every settlement established by mages, nobles, and residents of the Kingdom of Kent? Or maybe become a sailor. There is always a shortage of sailors, and barbarians, even if only elders can distinguish the stars and ocean currents, at least these people who row longboats and rob everywhere can become excellent grassroots sailors. Teacher, what about the other people in the kingdom? The local councils will definitely speed up their establishment and work hard to collect food, but other temples and nobles who occupy the land may not be willing to cooperate with us. If the temple and noble lords strongly refuse, or simply refuse to pay the relevant fees, the council, the order of the god of nature, would probably not be able to go to their land and put in such a huge effort to induce the growth of grain. Don't worry about this matter. After a moment of silence, the Lord of Thunder told his youngest disciple in an extremely stern tone. During this period, if anyone asks you to leave Nevis for medical treatment, don't go. If someone is sick, let them come to your door. If you invite them by force, let them come to me. Our neighborhood is finally on the list. Starting today, we will be closed for at least another 14 days, crying. Please subscribe, please vote, please comfort. Thanks to @bookfriend 16101718310503 for the 500 starting coin reward.